Welcome back. On today's episode, we're going to be resealing the steering cylinder on this John Deere 5300. Let's get started. Alright, so to do the steering cylinder rebuild, these are the tools that I'll be using. Some of these tools are redundant and I've got them as backups just in case you might not have all these same tools that I do. We've got a set of metal picks to remove all of the old seals. We've got this plastic trim tool right here to help us remove and install the new seals. We've got a set of vice grips and a pipe wrench. We've got a couple of different mallets here. Now back here in the back, we've got a 24mm or a 15/16 wrench to get some of our lines disconnected. And we've also got a 22mm or a 7/8 wrench. I've also got this 1 1/16 wrench that's ultra slim. This is actually going to be for helping us to remove our tie rod end assemblies. You'll see that when we get there. Same thing for the sockets. I've got a 24mm or a 15/16 socket, and I've also got a 25mm or a 1-inch socket. We've got a gallon of high guard transmission and hydraulic oil. That's going to be for topping us off once we've got everything removed. And we're also going to need a bench vise. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Next, I'm going to work on releasing my hoses from this connection right here. This is just a little bit easier access than the one that's actually on the steering rack itself. All right, now we'll let it drip for a little bit. That way we get as much fluid out as we can. And then we'll work on removing the actual steering cylinder. All right, now that we've got our steering cylinder completely removed, now I need to go ahead and remove these tie rod ends. And I need to separate these ends from the actual steering cylinder. And the way that I was able to do it on this vehicle is I was able to use a pair of channel locks and a pair of vice grips. And eventually I was able to break them loose. So we'll go ahead and get it unscrewed. We'll get this set off to the side. Now, one thing that I noticed after getting this complete tie rod assembly off of this side is that there's a little notch right here. And what I found is that I have a set of ultra thin wrenches that aren't ribbed for anyone's pleasure, but they fit just perfectly in that slot. So that'll make releasing this side much easier. So we'll go ahead and get this side released. Oh, finally. All right. That one definitely took a little more love than the other side. All right, so now that we've got both of our complete tie rod assemblies removed, we can go ahead and remove these end caps. And the way that I'll do that is I'll remove these hoses first, and then I'll work on tapping these out with a wood block so I don't damage this housing. There we go. Oh. Try not to spill too much. We do have a complete seal kit, so we will be replacing all of the seals inside of this housing, this one, and then there's actually a couple more seals in the middle that we'll be replacing. So now that we've got that side off, let's go ahead and slide the whole assembly out. And there we have it. There's two seals right here in the middle of this steering cylinder, so we'll need to get those replaced as well. All right, taking a look down inside of this cap cover, it looks like there's maybe 3-4 seals inside of here that need to be replaced. So we'll work on getting those out. We've got this exterior seal right here to replace, and this seal right here. So it looks like we've got 4 or 5 seals per end cap, plus the 2 seals that we've got on the actual steering cylinder. So we'll work on getting those out. Note that when you're doing this, I'm going to try and do it with some plastic tools, but if I have to use metal tools, I just want to avoid gouging any of the surfaces. We want to make sure that this seals and we don't have any problems making it leak again. And right here, this is the seal kit that I will be using. This is from the John Deere dealer. It was a little under $200 for this complete seal kit. All right, so I was finally able to get all my seals replaced. The best way that I found of doing these seals was with a couple of picks. Make sure that if you are doing this, you have some very sharp picks, because if they're dull, so what happens if you're using dull picks trying to get these out is that you end up just scraping away layers of these plastic seals. And these were the toughest part of it. You can see that on this one ended up coming out in pieces. So that definitely made my life a little bit more difficult. So I've got all of my seals removed. These are all that I had to replace in just one side of the cap. I've got a rubber outer seal, plastic seal, and then there's this blue and white seal that sit in the same groove. This one's plastic, this one's rubber. Plastic seal, and then the outer rubber seal that goes around this side. So now that we've got this end cap done, we'll put it back on the steering rack and we'll get started on the other side. Now that we've got the other side out, we'll go ahead and do the same thing, replace all the seals. This one's quite a bit dirtier, so we'll make sure to get this one cleaned up. That side came out much easier. Now that we've got that thick blue ring out of there, we can get the plastic white insert that's down in here out. Now we'll go ahead and get the new ring put in. Just like that. And then our new O-ring with the ribs facing away from the plastic spacer. Now because it is cold outside, I'm fighting this blue O-ring a little bit more than I want to. So I'm gonna grab my snap-on hairdryer just to heat it up and make it a little softer. And there we go, we've got our blue O-ring in place with a little bit of love and a little bit of heat. Now this is where these plastic tools come in hand. I was able to push it into place using this plastic. So now we'll do the outer O-ring. Same thing, this one's pretty cold, so we're gonna give it a little bit of heat. Just like that. Makes life a lot easier. And now we'll go ahead and we'll get this other side cleaned out. All right, that seal came out pretty easily. Now let's see how we do with the plastic seal on this side. And there we were able to get this one out. Again, it chipped a little bit on its way out. Much easier than what the other side was, so we'll get our new seals installed here. And last but not least, this last outer seal. And you can see that it looks a little wonky around the edges, so again, I'll take my plastic tool and work it into the seams. There we go. Just kind of using it to push it. Make sure that it's seated correctly and everything's nice and clean. Now that we've got all of this put back together, last but not least, we've got the two seals on the actual steering cylinder itself. All right, so right here, we've got another plastic ring that needs to go ahead and come off. And since these are not recessed down inside of that housing, these are much easier to go ahead and remove, just like that. Now, from what I'm seeing, this other seal is pretty stiff, so I've got a strong feeling that this may tear or break when we try to remove it. And you can see when I went to remove this O-ring, it just snapped. And it looks like we've got a little rubber O-ring that sits underneath it. So we'll go ahead and we'll get that removed as well. All right, so we'll go ahead and get the new O-ring on. Put this rubber O-ring in first. Nice and easy, just like that. And then follow it up with this harder seal. And we'll go ahead and we'll give this hard seal the blow dry treatment just because I don't want to risk breaking it when I try to install it. All right. And there we've got it on there. We'll put a little bit of lube on these seals, make it easier to reinstall the shaft. Make sure our shaft is nice and clean because you don't want anything dirty going back into the hole. So we'll go ahead and get this reassembled. Now the way that I was able to get this done was I ended up having to stand it up vertically, and then using a rubber mallet, I was able to push it through all the seals. Since we have fresh seals on here, even with lubrication, they're still pretty tight. So we got to give it a little bit of extra love to get it in there. So we'll get the other end cap on now. There we go. Then we want to get as close as possible to it being lined up, just to make it easier to bolt back together. And just like that, we'll give it a few taps with the rubber mallet. We've got our steering cylinder reassembled. Make sure that we can move it in and out. All right, we'll go ahead and start reassembling the tie rod ends, and we'll get it put back on the tractor. There we go. That side's nice and tight. Now we're ready to reinstall it back on the tractor. Now that we've got everything reassembled on the John Deere, I'll start it up. I'm going to turn the wheel left and right a few times, build pressure back up in the steering cylinder, make sure that we're not leaking anymore. Nothing too crazy on this job. I'm glad I got some experience doing these cylinder rebuilds because I've gotten a few calls about doing more hydraulic work, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that for my customers in the future. But in the meantime, we'll get the John Deere back out of the shop. I'm still waiting on parts to show up for the Aston Martin, and as soon as they do, we'll make some more progress on that. I want to say thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to me to have all of your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.